Hello everybody, welcome to another review. 10 could be reviewing the brand new album by Sleep Theory, Afterglow. So this is a new band from the US. They dropped their EP, Paper Hearts, recently, and it has Fallout and Numb as two of the big songs that ended up being put onto this record due to the success of them, which I don't blame you, to be honest, because if you have two successful songs on a previous release and it's like an EP and not necessarily an album, makes sense to put onto your debut album, because that's the main focus and that will probably bring up more numbers and put the band more into the spotlight, especially since this band also has over 1.8 million monthly listeners, which is insane. It kind of reminds me of Catch Your Breath just getting this huge popularity before their album comes out, just due to how big one of the singles made them. But we're going to be reviewing this new Sleep Theory record because I did have high expectations going into it, but I've got to be completely honest, I think they were shattered by the end. This was generally a big letdown of a record that I just cannot get into, and I'll start now by saying that a lot of the material that I'm not big on, just because it feels more basic and generic. Like, you can do the kind of butt rock, arena rock sound fine. There's a lot of bands that get labelled as that, and I think they do a decent job at it. It's just that it's more or less kind of what you call co-worker music, the sort of material that your friend would, or your co-worker, that's why it's called that, would go, oh, I like this, you might like it, sort of stuff, and you're not really interested. It's just a meme that a lot of people use to describe that your co-workers don't have the great taste in music you're not a big fan of, but either that or it's the fact that it's just kind of a more basic opinion that they have, and you might agree or disagree. It's not necessarily one-sided for that, but I just find this to be just downright almost a nothing burger of a album. At least it looks good from the first part, and it's a huge letdown by the second. We start off with Static. This was the one of the latest singles of the record, and I think honestly this was one of the better tracks and better singles we had. The energy's nice, and while it does go into some poppy choruses that I don't think quite fits the aesthetic of the track, it's still one of the best tracks we have here, and I personally will put this one on repeat. It's quite enjoyable, and with some of the other singles near the start as well, like Free, Fallout, Stuck in My Head, I think the variety we get here is quite nice. Some of the songs heavier than others, like Fallout. This one's a standout straight away, catchy, fun, and they do the hard rock sound here quite nice. And this is probably the most, at least to me, one of the better attempts at putting a slight metalcore edge into the sound, while it also just very much feels more or less post-hardcore-y, in the same vein that bands like Dayseeker would put in there. Matter of fact, a lot of this reminds me of Dayseeker, but I gotta be honest, the content is nowhere near as good as the quality they have put out. Something like Dark Sun will easily rip this album to shreds, and I'm not even that big on Dark Sun, to be honest, but yeah, that's just how I feel. I generally think when it comes to being a post-hardcore rock band, that pushing for a more kind of mainstream sound, the first few tracks usually stand out quite nicely. I'm not the biggest fan of Hourglass, as this one is probably the most forgettable song on the record, but as I said, Fallout's good, Free is good, Stuck in My Head is decent, but knowing the fact that the verse and vocal delivery sounds very similar to Happy Song by Bring Me the Horizon, I can't unhear it, and I think it's just a bit disappointing because the attention this song gets, it just feels like a downright weaker version of it, apart from it's a more upbeat song and less on the fact that it's about depression. But unfortunately, as I'm not that big on it, it gets weaker from there, with Gravity being probably my least favourite song on the entire record. I just find this to be very generic. It just kind of goes into this more emotional, basic, weak Dayseeker rip-off of a sound, and I can't get into it. It's just the most plain thing I have heard from the band, and it's disappointing as well. I don't know if this was a single or if this was like released lately. It's the most streamed of the brand new stuff, so it might have had a music video or something, but I really couldn't get into Gravity. It just feels so like there's nothing to it, and yeah, it has a music video, so it is one of the more prioritized songs, especially over some of the other tracks as well. But I gotta be honest, the singles were the stuff that really hooked me in, and I just think the non-album singles just kind of don't do anything for me. The second half just didn't get much better than that. Afterglow follows on feeling like another basic hard rock sound that doesn't really bring anything unique to the table. Numb is enjoyable, at least. Probably the only song I would go back to on the second half, maybe Paralyzed, because this single was alright. But Parasite, this one I was looking forward to, because normally if you have a song called Parasite, it's going to be one of the heavier, one of the more gritty, fun songs, and this one just came off as just absolutely bland and didn't have much to it. The riffs, especially on the second half, really don't stand out, and there is not really any vocal passage or anything that stood out to me. Matter of fact, I found vocally on tracks like Gravity and Words Are Worthless, I just don't really like the clean vocals in some of these songs. They just sound overdone, they just kind of force this emotion to it that I'm not a huge fan of how it's delivered, and I just can't really get into it. A lot of bands will do something similar, and I don't mind it, but something about how Sleep Theory do it here just doesn't really appeal to me. The second half, in my opinion, just really feels like there is the worst material on the record, and it's disappointing that it's an album that started off with some decently strong material, and then it just nosedives off a cliff with Gravity. I guess they just kind of forgot about Gravity. They didn't really flow with this one, unfortunately. I'm not a fan, and it's disappointing because I really was looking forward to this. Sleep Theory was one of the bands on my radar to keep an eye out, but I just think what we had here was just downright basic. It feels like the more octane hard rock stuff like Zephyr or Five Finger Death Punch, it'll fit perfectly onto a radio station that just plays that like Octane. So yeah, bit disappointed with this one. I'm going to have to give it a 2 out of 5. I personally just found vocally, the vocals just kind of get a bit irritable on this. The instrumentation has some good riffs, but a lot of it just feels kind of basic, and I think as a whole the songwriting just doesn't really go anywhere creative. It just kind of feels like 12 just basically written songs. Some of them pretty good, but it very much varies, and I'm not a fan of it. So I hope you enjoy. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next video.